what I'd like to do kind of ambitiously is I want to sum up everything I ever taught in any course in about 5 or 10 minutes. And like, what's the essential thing? And I'm hoping that will put into perspective what we will be looking at today. We have been looking at creation. We have been looking at manifestation. We have been looking at healing and inner blocks and things that come up. And what does all of that have to do with the theory that we're going to look at in the HHHG? What does all of that have to do with tarot, Qabbalah, the Upanishads, Plotinus? What does that have to do with the thing that which everyone has been talking about at the mystical misfit lunch table of the School of the Universe for thousands of years? Let's talk about it. Essentially, when we're looking at creation in terms of stages, what we're looking at is, in the Qabbalah, there are 4 planes, right? There's your Atziluth, there's your Bria, there's your Yetzirah, there's your Asaya. These 4 planes through which something emanates or manifests or is created. And remember, when you're looking at the HHHG, what we looked at last week, it showed us these 3 or so different maps of a bridge between the self that we are day to day and the big capital S self that we are, whether you call that consciousness, existence, awareness, divinity, God, Brahman, whatever you call it, the actual divine truth of us, right? So every most mystical traditions have some sort of map or philosophical map or written map or set of methods that bring you from one to the other, that bring you from hermetically what would be considered below to the above, what would bring you from one state of consciousness to another. And again, whether that's an emanation system or a manifestation or a ladder or there's many ways that this happens. And it's a two-way street. On the one hand, on the mystical side of the street, going up, what we're doing is going into that maximum, beautiful, boundless, blissful, eternal, limitless consciousness that we discovered where we know that we are. Remember from that first exercise, measuring, you can measure your body, you can find the edges of your body, right? But you cannot find the edges of your awareness. You cannot find the edges of your consciousness. So that's key. It's in your normal, it's nothing mystical, nothing crazy. It's just noticing, oh, there is no limits to my consciousness. It's not, it's just a thing. It's just true, right? So we're bridging those two extremes, and we're being curious about how does a limitless consciousness that you are in this moment now relate to a life that begins and ends, a body that starts and ends in space, a feeling that begins and ends, an idea that has intellectual or conceptual frames, right, edges. So yeah, and there's two ways to do that. So on the one way, there is the mystical path, and there's many methods to ascend to that. So that's one way, going upwards, right, towards that limitlessness, experience, truth, consciousness. And then on the other side of the street, because it's a two-way street, there's manifestation, there's creation. And that's where we take our limitless consciousness, and through the process of choice and naming and forming and functioning and action and emotion and all these things, we carve out the reality that we want, okay? So the metaphor is that if somebody wants to build a table, first you have to have the idea of, well, I need something to put my computer on to teach class. So, oh, what do I need? I need, what is it? That first thing, that's stage one, that intention, that will, that fire, that suit of wands, that world of Atziluth, that high place of just pure will, pure, I need a table. No, not even I need a table, just I need something to put my laptop on because I want to sit down because I'm lazy. Then step two is, what could that be? It could be a table. Then the idea of the table comes forth, the concept of the table. And notice how that concept is starting to have some form. It's starting to have definition. It's not clearly defined yet. I'm not showing you a picture of a table or letting you touch the table or letting you build it. It's just an idea, right? So that's Kabbalistically Bria. That I'm going to stretch this. It's not exactly accurate, but you can stretch it and say that this idea of anything must come from the nous in Plotinus' system. This is kind of like Chokmah and Bina in the Tree of Life. So Bina gives form, makes something a thing. Because now it's not just limitless consciousness, it's a table. And a table is a thing that's coming out of no thing, no specific thing. Now we have a specific thing. So the next stage is to draw a blueprint of the table. What are its measurements? What is it going to look like? What is it going to be made out of? What's its weight? What do we need to know? What tools do we need to build it? And that blueprinting is the intellectual, the rational sphere, which in Qabbalah is called the world of Yetzirah. You might maybe stretch this to Plotinus's idea of the soul, maybe not quite. But you can definitely stretch this to the Vedantic Taijasa, which is kind of like the inner world, the soul, the dream world, because it's kind of like we're dreaming it up first. We're imagining it first with clear proportions and measurements. And then when we have that, we know what we're doing, and we can actually go and get the materials and get the wood and get the tools and start getting to work and hopefully build a table. Now, sometimes, if I were to build a table, it would look like some weird modern art because I can barely build anything. So it would probably be all crooked and weird and like just not functional. And sometimes that happens, right? So let me back up. So when we build the table in the manifest world, in the world of action, which is asaya in Qabbalah, or the waker's world in Vedanta, which would be the Virat, or also called the Vishwa, which is the waking world, or in Plotinus would call it nature and matter. When we build something in this material world, then it's in our waking world. We can experience it. We can experience it with the senses, not just with the mind, right? So we're going from intention to mind to physical senses, right? And that's great. And then you have a table, hopefully. And that's the creative process. Boom, you created a table. Now, if you're like me, again, you probably wouldn't have a table at least on your first try, unless it was very clearly, the instructions were abundantly clear on every little step in between. And you might have a crooked table. I might have a crooked table. And then I would say, okay, I have a crooked table. I didn't manifest the table exactly as I wanted. And then I could go back and see, what did I miss? Did I get a wrong part? Did I make a mistake on the blueprints? Or did I think the table, maybe even before the blueprint, I didn't even think the table had to be flat. Maybe I had an abstract notion of what a table was. So maybe that abstract table that I built that can't really put anything on it, but it's kind of cool to sit in the room. I don't know, interior design moment. Maybe it is exactly what I wanted. But you can notice, okay, you can adjust, right? And then and that's the creative process. So what does this have to do with what we're doing? We're constantly in this process of creation. And the thing is, you're participating with reality no matter what even if you pretend that you aren't, you are participating in reality. So we are all creators, and whether we create consciously or unconsciously is up to us. And so the goal of at least my life in this course is to get people and myself to create more consciously, so that we have more perfect tables that are perfectly flat, functional, and beautiful, and are exactly the tables that we asked for, right? That we planned. And the tarot, the Qabbalah, Plotinus, Vedanta, all the things that are in the HHHG are various ways to look at this process of manifestation, okay? Now, I want to reverse this metaphor in kind of a weird way, but let me actually stay with this. I want to stay on this side of the street, going into manifestation for a bit, because what we're going to look at today, I want to go into the linguistic stuff. So creation and creation uses the metaphors that are used in a lot of mystical traditions are very linguistic, because what the early mystics and philosophers discovered was that creation can be either analogous to or identical with language and idea. Remember the other week I said, can you show me anything that's not an idea? You can't present really anything or communicate anything that's not an idea. I mean, you can feel something, right? You can feel something, you can feel pain, you can have emotions, you can have indescribable experiences, but they aren't things per se until you say what they are. They just pass over you, right? So I used to do depression a lot. Like I told you guys, I used to do depression 6 days a week, then 5 days a week, then 4 days a week. But it was depression because I said it was depression, right? I said, okay, this is depression, this is what it is. And then I started to not say it was that. I didn't deny anything. I just allowed myself to feel whatever. And then things started to loosen up. Okay. So in these mystical traditions, you'll look at something like, let's start with the Sefer Yetzirah in Qabbalah, one of the earliest Kabbalistic texts. It's a very deep and very ambiguous and really awesome and kind of weird text on the creation of the universe. And it describes how God created the universe through the Hebrew Aleph Bet and through these paths. And it's very abstract, but there's all these different interpretations, but it's very deep, but it all comes out of the mouth. So it's using this metaphor of the mouth as something that literally shapes the air, and by shaping the air creates sound and creates idea and creates things. Create separate things that come out of no thingness. Okay, it all comes out of no thingness. Now, no thingness doesn't necessarily mean avoid. It could be, you might in the traditions like the Shunyavada tradition of Nagarjuna, that's the doctrine of the void. That's one way to look at it. Or if that would be considered a apophatic way to look at it, or there are certain. But the no thingness, it's really what I like the words negative theology, because it's not saying that there's nothing, it's saying that there's no thing, there's no concept that can explain it. But you can also approach it in a cataphatic way, like the Advaita Vedantins, which say it's Brahman. Brahman is this all, but Brahman's not an idea. Okay, so out of this no thingness, things are carved out of reality. Or one might say projected, or one might say interpreted, or one might say manifested, or one might say made through language, either literally or metaphorically, okay? The Sefer Yetzirah is at least a metaphor, if not a literal explanation of the creation of the universe. And if you want to have fun with it, you might say creation of the matrix, like it might be like the esoteric coding of like the matrix, using the Hebrew letters and using the mouth as it shapes reality. Kind of like a magician, right? Kind of like the magician card in the tarot, like the magus who comes in with language. And what is the magus and the magician connected to? Hermes. Hermes is the god of the messenger, right? He's the messenger god of language. He's a trickster. Language can be very tricky, right? And Hermes Trismegistus, right? Hermes is also connected to the Logos being the intelligence of the universe. Christ was connected to the Logos in around 500 CE. Anywho, the connections go on. In Advaita Vedanta, they do a similar thing. Obviously, they're not using Hebrew, they're using Sanskrit, but they're using the word Om. And if we have time, we'll look at the Upanishad today, but the Mandukya Upanishad uses the word Om in a way as a metaphor, but also as an identity with all of existence, with literally everything past, present, and future, every possible thing in the universe and beyond. Om. And the idea is Om symbolizes 4 states. And the 4 states are waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and that which all of them exist in. So we have waking, we have dreaming, we have the waking world, the dream world, like the inner world, deep sleep, which is essentially what all the yogis want to get to, but consciously, and then that which they all exist in. And it uses those extremes to show what is beyond all of those 3 states, which is the 4th state. But what we're going to notice today is that those 4 states and the 4 worlds of the Qabbalah, which is the Atziluth, the Bria, Yetzirah, and Asaya, and the 4 hypostases, they're called, of Plotinus, are all kind of similar. And they're not the same, but the similarities are so intriguing. And they're all showing us a map between our current experience right now and the infinite experience that we intuit to be, which in a way is undeniable because it is pure awareness. And nothing can exist without awareness. Nothing can exist in a vacuum. Like it's impossible to show that something exists outside of awareness, consciousness. Okay, so let's see what's here. But I just want everyone to recognize the importance of language as a literal tool in creating your world, but also as the metaphor that has been used by some of the deepest mystical writings ever. It all comes down to language, okay? Okay. And language is very much associated with the Indian concept of Maya, the world of illusion. The world of illusion, and when I say this, I don't want you guys, remember how I said that this stuff is like pretty high up and it's not, it can be a little like, not for everyone. When I say this, I'm not saying the world is unreal, escape it. No. What I'm saying is that the concept of Maya is that everything as a separate thing that you experience exists because of name, form, or function. And when we read things like the Sefer Yetzirah, which creates the world through language, and when we read things like Mandukya Upanishads and other texts that show how that use the metaphor of the one word that contains it all, what we're seeing is the creation that you all did in class 1 and 2 by writing down your fantasy script and writing down your targets and updating it over time. That is the creation of, these texts. That is, that's what it's all about. It's a creative act. It's a creative act. So yeah. So tarot, we got 4 suits. 4 suits describe 4 planes of creation. Now, in divination, it describes usually more like the fields and areas of life that are showing up, but esoterically, it's 4 planes of creation. And then the major arcana are showing us a path, a map of a descent of consciousness going into manifestation, and also the path of the ascent, manifestation going back into consciousness. So, so like when you build it, I don't know, like when I moved to Philly, I actually surprised myself. I got these Amazon packages and I followed the directions very closely and I actually completed a couple pieces of furniture. But when you're building something, right, you're looking at the names, the forms, and the functions of every piece, every Lincoln log and screw and this and that and Lego and all the pieces to build the furniture. They all have a name, a form, and a function. And that's what we do to create our worlds, okay? That's one way. That's one way we can look at it. Okay, now, the reverse of that, and the metaphor of the chariot is commonly used. It's used in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika of Nagarjuna, which is a mouthful, but I can send it to you. There's a couple quotes in it in the HHHG. It's used in Upanishads, it's used in tarot, it's used by Plato. The metaphor of the chariot being it's commonly used for this, but I'm going to use the table, right? So let's say the table doesn't want to be a table anymore. So the table I just built from Amazon is sick of holding up my computer. It's sick of all the coffee I spill on it. It's sick of all the tarot cards that I'm constantly throwing down on it and all this stuff. And it's like, you know what? This sucks. I don't want to be a table anymore. Well, what the table can do is recognize that it can disassemble itself. And that's not what we're doing here. But what it can start to do is recognize, well, is it really a table? And it can go back in and say, well, what's it really made up of? And it can go and say, well, I'm not really a table. I'm actually a bunch of cheap particle board. Okay, that's kind of cool. Particle board is interesting. And I'm not even really cheap particle board. I'm all these pieces of this cheap particle board, poorly assembled by this crazy tarot reader person. And you could go even farther and say, oh, well, particle board is not even particle board. It's just like dead trees that have been like smashed together, and trees aren't really even, and you just go back and you keep going back and it starts to disassemble itself, right? It's still there, it's still a table, but then it doesn't have to just be a table. Or you can work it like, okay, is it a table because you're experiencing the table, but it's really, oh no, you go back to the blueprint. It exists because it's an idea, it has a name, form, and function, but where does that idea of the table exist? And then you start to unearth that and unpick that. And then this poor anthropomorphized table can realize only that it's just coming out of pure consciousness, pure awareness. To show what I'm talking about here. So I know most of you have studied the Tree of Life relatively in depth with me, but I know not everyone has. But for right now, just know that the Tree of Life, like all these other two maps, are a ladder or a bridge between our current experience and that consciousness, bliss, place, nothingness, no-thingness. And so is Plotinus's great chain of being. It shows these stages of emanation. And so is, in a way, the Mandukya Upanishad, though it's not exactly an emanation system, it has some really cool connections to this. Okay, so when we're writing down our intentions and feeling like we already have it and just being very judicial with our thoughts and our energy and all of that, we're in this actually, we're always in this process. I mean, I don't think you can not be in this process. So it's just about being in this process and kind of going upwards and being more aware of what's flowing through in your world, in your life. And it doesn't have to be Genesis and the creation of Adam and Eve. It can just be the morning coffee, you have an intention. I wake up and I'm like, oh, coffee. And then I have a feel, oh yeah, that'll be nice. And then I go and do it, right? But notice that there's 4 sections to this. And I have it divided in 4 to show the connections, but to also show the steps. We have the intention up here, which doesn't exactly connect to what all of these ideas are, but for general, like creating, we have the intention up here. We have the object of your desire here. We have the internal world and the ideas about it and the blueprint, and then we have the manifestation of that. But the manifestation down here is important because this is literally, in Kabbalah, it's asaya, the world of action. So the action is also necessary. But again, so this is the creative process. And what I sent to you all, it's a sort of, the reason why I say relative reality is because everything from blue downwards exists relative to something else. The table is a table because it has the name form function I give it. It has a function of what? The relationship between what it is on top of it, what is sitting on it, okay? It has a form in relationship to that which is outside of its form. It has a name because it's not a chair, right? Or I would call it a chair. Different name, different form, different function, all existing relatively to other things. So that's the relative reality that we've been looking at in class 1 and 2. And then last week, we made a U-turn and we started to look at what are the questions and methods and what is ascending this ladder? What would that be about? And so what we're going to continue to do today is look at the ideas around, I don't want to say dismantling, but going beyond the name, forms, and functions that come about when we create. And that includes what we create in our body, what we create in our mind, what we create in our life, thoughts. And from hearing from you guys so far, it sounds like you're already doing this, you're already going upwards and exploring that through the meta meditations, which is great. And I know in class 1, we already had some really awesome experiences around that. Because in the meditations, what we're doing is we're zooming out from the names, the forms, and the functions that we are used to, which is not to deny them, it's to see them within something else, okay? And last week, I presented everyone with that map. We're going to, with this guy, where it's relative reality, or what's this one? We have choice, relative reality or absolute reality. In relative reality, we have fear, or we might say victim, and we have love, or we might say creator. And victim is a creation. Again, there were a lot of, like when I used to do depression, I had a lot of things that I was doing it for, and it's not a badness, it's not a wrongness. I want to make that very clear. It's a choice. So I would tell myself, I can't do anything about this. I don't have any power in this. I don't want to like get up and go outside. And the benefit was I got to stay in, I got to sleep, there were endless benefits. It's cool, it's just a choice. One thing I'm learning from my Jedi Master is, and she's very insistent on this, is that you can only be either creator or victim. You can't be a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. You are fully in creator and fully in victim. I used to jump between them, but still I would have the energy of, oh, okay, I'm ready for the world. I'm here, I'm feeling gratitude, I'm in the flow, and then it would like turn off, right? But it was one or the other. It wasn't like, I kind of feel like I might go outside. Like I wasn't like hovering in the threshold of action and curiosity and question. It was just, okay. So there's that. And being in the creator is working with all the things I just presented that are from old mystical books, thousands of years old, to the latest self-help book that just dropped today. It's probably in there somewhere. And it's you. It is you. It's what you're creating now. You're all creating an experience now. You're here on the call, you're listening to me, you're thinking, or maybe you're not listening, and that's okay too. You're creating something else, creating 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day. There's that. And then there is the third thing that is this, what I just have here is absolute reality. And that's where we go, where we start to sort of uncreate in a way. We start to dismantle all the names and forms and functions. And there's many ways to do that. The ways presented here they all share in that they are conceptual. So they're knowledge-based paths. So like we have 4 paths usually that mysticism falls in. It's usually either devotional, like something like Sufism, or aspects of Christianity, like worshiping, feeling love, like very divine, very ecstatic, beautiful, beautiful poetry and testimonies have come out of that. It's like so beautiful. Then there's meditative practices like Raja Yoga, or which is you're shutting the mind down. You're literally, through years and years of practice, you're turning off the screen of the mind so that you're turning off the movie so you can see the screen. You're completely turning it off, and then you recognize, oh, there is still existence, even when there's no thought. But you don't do this with thought. It's a whole experience, very mystical. That you get from Yoga Sutras. That's Patanjali. And there's many other methods too, but that's a popular one. And then there are knowledge-based contemplative paths like Qabbalah. I would even include, maybe this is a stretch, but I would include Plotinus too, because it seems like philosophy, but then it's actually mysticism. And Advaita Vedanta and many other ones. This would be like the Suit of Swords, where it's based on ideas and it's inquiry, and you're using your own mind to supersede the mind. And then there's one other path that then there's the path of service, karma yoga, which is being a good person. And that's one might say is gratitude, appreciating what you have, the Suit of Pentacles, but also letting go of your own path and helping somebody else's path. And that can get you out of your own way. So there's paths with that too. But yeah, most of this is conceptual because the tarot is itself a Yetziratic tool. That's a quote from Paul Foster Case, I think. He says that because the tarot is Yetziratic, meaning it exists in the world of Yetzira, the world of the blueprint, this yellow world right here, it's working with ideas and it's working with concepts. And so that's how we're approaching it here. Of course, we have the meta meditations, but they are to support this. Let me check chat real quick, and then we will. Oh, yes, beautiful. You don't want the nail, but you want the picture on the wall, but you got to get the nail to put the picture on the, yes, exactly. It reminds me of CIM teaching. Ooh, what's CIM? Yes, okay, A Course in Miracles. Oh, so good, right? A Course in Miracles, you think it's going to be all lovey-dovey, and then it's radical, hardcore non-duality right from the first page. It's like nothing exists. It's so, love that book. Very, very powerful stuff. Yeah, but you know what? A Course in Miracles, it's a process. That's why there's a whole workbook. It's like every day you just take a minute in the beginning, and it's just because what you're doing in A Course in Miracles and in a lot of these practices is you're beginning to let go of however many years, lifetimes, experiences of conditions and points of views and judgments and all of this stuff. That's not bad, right? It's not a badness. It's just there. It's the table slowly recognizing that it's not really a table. It's just awareness. It recognizes, oh, I'm just an idea. Oh, I'm not even an idea. I'm just awareness. Oh my God. But we've been talking about things like badness and badness happening to good people and the fairness of the universe or the unfairness or the control. And it's what I want to do in this course is to empower you to recognize your creative potential and that you have a choice. And that when things happen, I really believe you can always find a benefit. And for me, and I'm not saying this is true for you, and I don't want to force this belief on you, but for me, everything that's ever happened to me, I could come to this place and say, oh, no, not when I was in it, this is years later, but I could say, oh, I bet I created this for this, and I created this for this, and I created this for this. And it's like a movie that continues the plot where there are scenes that are not fun all the time, but continues the plot so that there's this beautiful resolution at the end that brings it all together. And yeah, but then the mystical side of things is to say, where is the movie? Is to say, don't worry about the movie, notice the screen. Notice where the whole movie is playing on. That's the next level.